For the longest time now in our world today, fossil fuels have been the primary source of energy. And by the longest time, I mean even before the very first steam engine. That ran on coal or even the first commercially drilled oil well. And certain forms of petroleum, coal, and natural gas were used over millennia ago, but different civilizations on different continents, according to historical records and archaeological findings. We can even say that the entire history of fossil fuels is definitely as old as the history of human civilization. However, we can't entirely compare the early use of fossil fuels to what we have today, from its exploration to its extraction, processing, then trading industries for three primary fossil fuels. These three fuels, put together, make up the majority of the energy used in our world. The use of these fossil fuels was very much limited in ancient times due to the fact that they didn't necessarily have the knowledge or even the technology to harness all the power they possessed. However, as civilization occurred, they made sure, or at least to an extent, were able to make the most out of the extracted fossil fuel resources while using them in their everyday lives. And so, today on Prometheus Network, we will be doing a quick rundown on the history of fossil fuels and the current state they are in the moment. Whether promising or not, make sure to stick around till the end of this video to find out. As we already know, fossil fuels are basically a class of materials that are formed from dead organisms that have entirely sunk below the Earth's surface over millions of years. It is essential to keep in mind that every fossil fuel you know existed at some point as organic material, but due to several conditions ranging from pressure to temperature, the formation of different types of fossil fuels has come into existence. Here is the basic fact: ancient civilizations had no form of technology to drill or even refine oil. However, they used the petroleum they could find seeping at the surface for construction and waterproofing. According to Herodotus, an ancient Greek historian, bitumen that was obtained from a small creek of the river Euphrates was used in the construction of the walls of Babylon, which is the famous city of ancient Mesopotamia. These Mesopotamians as well made use of bitumen in the construction of their roads and the sealing of the leaks in their boats. Aside from these ones, other civilizations used asphalt as glue for their works and oil for lighting their fire pans before the wick oil lamp was introduced. Others used this oil to burn as their weapon in warfare. Some used this petroleum as a medicinal treatment on their skin as they believed that it had medicinal benefits. These were all what petroleum was limited to in the early days. However, it was an entirely different case when it came to natural gases. With this one, they were a lot more confused and simply thought of it to be supernaturally inclined. Certain civilizations were thought to have used it to heat their homes, and soon by the 19th century, natural gas was mainly used for the purpose of lighting. And then there was coal. Now, unlike the other two, petroleum and natural gas can only be found in reservoirs in certain places in the world. It was an entirely different case with coal, considering the fact that it is much more widespread. For over 1,000 years now, people have been mining coal, but even more, they have been mining coal since the time of the cavemen. By the 15th and 16th centuries, coal became one of the most important fuels for heating homes as fire brick chimneys were introduced. However, regardless of how many civilizations had used these resources, it wasn't until mid-18th century that the Industrial Revolution came into play in Britain, which led to coal, oil, and finally, natural gas becoming the prominent energy source for both industrial and household uses in both the UK and across the globe. Now, this Industrial Revolution came with the invention of the steam engine, which was the beginning of manufacturing productions, machines, and even factories, which altogether brought the entire society into a brand new modern era. And so this steam engine, which was designed by James Watt, became the push for the Industrial Revolution. Keep in mind that this steam engine was majorly powered by coal. Before the Industrial Revolution, water had been the major source of power. However, following this revolution, coal, a flourishing source of power, took its place. With coal and steam engines taking over the place, mass production became possible as a result of steam-powered machines. This was indeed the beginning of industrial activities. This entire revolution brought a massive change to the way individuals worked and traveled. Soon, many individuals comfortably traveled on steamships and steam-powered trains with their boilers powered by burning coal, making this the major means of transportation. In the early 19th century, the Industrial Revolution got to the United States. Different coal mines started to operate in the U.S., and soon coal became a replacement for wood as a source of heating, considering how easy it was to transport. And soon, the consumption of coal was progressively growing and surpassing the use of wood for energy. By the 1880s, coal was used for the generation of electricity in the United States, and soon, less than a century later, coal had become the chief energy source of electricity generation in the U.S. by the early 1960s. Now back in the 18th century, owners of wells found oil. However, at the time, they'd been digging for salt and could barely understand how useful and important crude oil was. Fortunately, as the advancement of drilling technology and techniques took over, and also with a better understanding of the use of oil, by the mid-19th century, people started to intentionally target crude oil whenever they drilled a well. By 1859, the very first modern commercial oil well was drilled in Titusville, Pennsylvania, by Edwin L. Drake. Looking at the passion put towards the drilling for salt, Drake decided to do something similar with drilling for oil. Drake worked closely with the Pennsylvania Rock Oil Company, which at the time was basically gathering the oil that had been seeping through the ground. And so personally, Drake decided to drill a well that would reach the oil, considering how much of a viable enterprise it was compared to collecting the oil that was basically seeping through the surface. One that changed the total demand for petroleum products around the globe, and this was the first car with an internal combustion engine. The very first automobile that was going to run on gasoline was a refined product of crude oil and was invented by Carl Benz, a German engineer, in 1885. By 1908, Henry Ford went ahead and launched the Model T in the United States. This was an affordable mass-market automobile that pushed the demand for gasoline. With the vast production of cars, gasoline in no time started to outshadow kerosene as the refined product from oil that was most in demand. And by the mid-20th century, oil was now the most used source of energy in the U.S. courtesy of the demand for gasoline. Now with the oil demand from automobiles, the world wars also created a huge demand for petroleum products as their tanks, warships, and trucks were all in need of fuel. With the navies and armies expanding their fleets and war power, the demand for oil around the world continued growing. Standard Oil Company, which was founded in 1870, controlled over 80% of the production and distribution of petroleum products in the U.S. at the end of the 19th century. But following the lawsuits and court orders, Standard Oil split up into 34 different companies. And the largest of the split companies has developed over the past century through mergers, acquisitions, and even more name changes to become the supermajors of the U.S. oil industry today. Now, with the oil majors still producing huge volumes of oil and natural gas daily, today we have a world that uses vast amounts of energy, and most of that comes from fossil fuels. And even with that, energy demands are expected to increase even more regardless of the fact that the share of coal is set to drop and be significantly replaced by natural gases and renewable energy sources. But even with the increased attention that has been put on carbon emissions and climate change in recent years, and despite the calls for all of these fuels to be left in the ground, fossil fuels are set to continue playing a vital role in energy consumption in our world. And with that, it is important to keep in mind that fossil fuels are basically not the only way for electricity to be generated. And this is cleaner technology that includes green energy alongside energy storage and improved energy efficiency to support what is known to be a more sustainable energy system with little to no carbon emission. This is basically a result of the fact that the burning of fossil fuels was responsible for about 74% of the United States' greenhouse gas emissions by 2019. However, the fossil fuel industry obtains about $20 billion in direct federal subsidies. But on the other hand, it was recorded in 2020 that green energy was responsible for almost 20% of the generation of electricity in the United States and is expected to grow even more significantly than these numbers. Thankfully, as the economy moves further away from fossil fuels, and towards sustainable green energy, the future of fossil fuels in the near future will remain uncertain as the solution to all these issues that were birthed by fossil fuels. From land degradation to water pollutants, greenhouse emissions, global warming pollution, ocean acidification, and all forms of air pollution that have taken over, our world remains a world with cleaner energy. That said, we have clear as glass that we are certainly not locked to fossil fuels forever, and in our world today, significant and huge steps have been made to further get us out of that world, and hopefully we all can incorporate that initiative that will give us a better life. That said, we have come to the end of this video. Let us know in the comment section down below your thoughts on fossil fuel energy and what more you would love to see. Do make sure to give it a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new around here, and ring that bell notification on the side so you don't miss any more uploads. Thank you very much for watching.